Hello, gentle viewers. This is Indian welcoming you to Tabletop Simulator and the incredible war game Washington's War, designed by Mark Herman and published by GMT Games. Washington's War is a strategic war game for two players of the point-to-point variety, in which the Americans are facing off against the British, the Americans attempting to win their independence, and the British attempting to keep the Americans under their thumb, or whatever body part you prefer to specify. This is an asymmetrical war game, which means the rules are a little bit different for both sides, and they have similar but differing goals. The game ends when one of two things happens. One side achieves an automatic victory, which is none of your opponent's CUs, military units, are on the board. Generals don't count. Only units do. So, for instance, if we look at... Come on, there's a British soldier that's just hanging out. Oh, here's an American one right here. Like, this gentleman here in Charleston is a CU, a combat unit. If either side has no units on the board, they lose the game. That's pretty simple. The other way is when certain events come up in the deck. These are called... North's government falls. Here's an example right here. The game ends at the end of that turn if it is that year or later. Once that happens, you determine who wins by determining the different colonies and who controls them. If the British control 7 or more colonies, excluding Canada, they win the game. Sorry, I misspoke. That includes Canada. And the British need 6 or more. It's the Americans that need 7 or more. So there's actually 14 possible colonies, including Canada. But Canada doesn't count as a colony for some rules, and does count as a colony for others. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So, let's talk about the game board, because it's the most important part of understanding how the game works. The map is divided into many, many spaces, each of which falls in a certain colony, or Canada, and each one also has a specific purpose. Circles, like Westchester or Morristown, are towns. Squares, like New York, Hartford, and Wyoming Valley, are cities, and the 8-pointed stars are forts. Like, there's only 4 in the game. It's Charleston, Philadelphia, and a couple others I can't be bothered with looking for right now. Oh, Montreal and Quebec. That's it. Now, whether a space is a town, fort, or city is not going to matter too much. There's big circumstances when it does matter, and we'll get into that later on. But for the most part, all spaces are created equal. You will see in occasional places, like from Bassetttown to Fort Detroit, that there are these dashed lines. These are considered wilderness spaces and are more difficult to move through. There's a couple other examples, but that's the most famous one. Any space that has a little anchor by it is considered a port. This is very, very important for the British, and a little bit less so for the Americans. Please note, very easy mistake to make, because it is on the coast. Monmouth, not a port. There's no symbol there. Let me just make sure that it's not an errata thing, but I am absolutely positive that it is not a port. So, do keep that in mind. It is not a port. So, the game board is divided into the original 13 colonies and Canada. And each colony has a certain number of spaces in it. You can figure this out by looking at the yellow diamond underneath the name of the colony. Virginia is the biggest with 11 spaces. New York has 10, and the others have less, going all the way down to itty-bitty Rhode Island and Delaware. Whoever has the most PCs in a colony controls the colony. So at the beginning of the game, you'll notice that some colonies actually belong to the British and some belong to the US, the Americans, sorry, and some technically belong to no one. But for the sake of having them all here, the creator of the mod kindly put them all here. But technically, South Carolina should be uncontrolled because America's got Charleston, the British have 96, therefore it's even and nobody controls it. I'm not going to bother with it because it's going to change quite soon, but it's something that you should keep in mind as you continue through the game. Because this schematic really matters because it's how you determine how many colonies a given side has. Because remember, at the end of the Lord North's Government Falls turn, the American needs 7 or more colonies in order to win the game. It is possible for there to be a tie. If there is a tie, the British actually win. So it's technically 7 or more colonies and 1. No, it isn't. I take that back. So the Americans would win the tie in that case. If there's 7 American and 7 British colonies, no, they would both achieve victory, so it would be a tie. I promise I know what I'm talking about. I'm just having a brain fart. I'm sorry. Yes, so because there are 14 colonies, counting Canada, if there's 7 British and 7 American, the British win. If at the end of the game there would be a tie, or if neither side has won, the British are considered to have won. So that's what you need to know about the board. You need to know who controls a particular space, which is marked by political control markers, or PCs. These are all dual-sided, British, American, and back to British. You'll notice this line here between North Carolina and Virginia. This is called the winter attrition line. It is important in one phase of the game, the winter attrition phase. And we'll talk about that a bit later on because it's different for both sides. Before I go any farther, my goal for each episode of this, and it will take multiple, is that we'll cover 2 years. If a turn goes really, really fast, maybe I'll think about covering 3 years. But this video in particular will only be 2 years because I'm spending a fair bit of time setting up the game for you. So that's what you need to know about the board. Other than that, it's pretty simple as far as moving around and things like that. Any given space has one of 3 statuses. It could be British controlled, American controlled, or, like Petersburg here, uncontrolled. The control of the space is very important because it affects whether markers will be isolated at the end of a given turn. And while we'll talk about this more later on, just as an early introduction, spaces have to be able to draw to specific other kinds of spaces, or they get removed from the board at the end of a particular turn. For both sides, you can draw to friendly troops or an empty space. The Americans can also draw to generals, even if they don't have troops. The British need an army, so they need both troops and generals, I believe. Let me triple check that. I could be checking the player aids. I don't know why I'm not, because it's definitely on the player aid. But, yeah, let's check the player aid. The player aids are excellent for this game. They're really fantastic, and they're borderline impossible to play the game without them. But isolation... So it has to draw to an empty space, like this one, a British CU, or a British port. The Americans, on the other hand, have a very different time of it. They can draw to an empty space, an American or French general, it doesn't matter if there's any troops, or the Continental Congress. Americans cannot use ports or established lines of supply, aka they cannot use ports to prevent isolation. Only the British can do that because of the Royal Navy. So, The game takes place in 7 phases per turn. And each phase is played in every turn of the game. And once they're all completed, you end the turn. And then play proceeds to the next turn. I think that's all I want to talk about before I start talking about cards, so I'm going to talk about cards next. This is a card-driven game. Washington's War, as you may know, is based off We the People, an older card-driven game that was the inspiration itself for many, many other card-driven games, many of which you've seen on this channel. This includes games like Hannibal, Rome vs. Carthage. It includes games like For the People, also done by Mark Herman. It includes games like Paths of Glory. It includes games like Twilight Struggle. It includes lots of games. We the People has very distinguished lineage, although Washington's War is a remake of We the People. I've never actually played We the People. Partly because I think Washington's War is just, it's better. And we should definitely acknowledge the debt that the wargaming industry has to We the People. Washington's War is a superior product, in my opinion, based on what I've heard about it and from reading the rulebook, although I've never played it. So, the game is driven in large part by these 110 cards in the deck. Notice that 2 of them do start outside the deck. These don't get shuffled in until the second turn of the game. So, every turn in the deck can be divided, broadly speaking, into one of 2 kinds of card. We have events, and we have... here we go, perfect. Ops. We'll talk about events first. Every event card contains a flag, except for the ones that are universal, that determines who can actually play that card as the event is written. In this case, it's a British flag, so only the British players can play it. Events can be played for either the text of the card, or you can discard an event to do very specific things, which are the same for both players, and I'm hoping it's listed here on the... Whoops. I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. Come back. You can discard an event card to take one political control action, which is either adding a marker to the board or flipping an existing marker or removing a marker from the board. Those are all considered PC actions, and you can do that by discarding an event. You can also discard any event for a +1 bonus in a battle. This particular card is actually a battle card. You can tell by the red background of the title. And this is actually worth a +2 and has some other really powerful abilities here. In this case, it removes the General Benedict Arnold from the game, which is pretty great. And Benedict Arnold is very special because he's the only person who can go from Falmouth directly to Quebec. If you don't have him, then it's much harder to get there. So those are event cards. They're for one side or the other. You play them either as the event says, or if it's your opponent's event, or you don't want to, you discard the event. If you discard an event, like let's say the American player drew this card and discarded it, the other team can pick it up by playing any ops card. So that's pretty important. It means that you can't ignore an event, in other words. You have to be very careful when you discard an event, even if you're doing it for something simple. That does not apply for discarding it during a battle, however. If you discard an event during a battle for the +1 bonus, you do not have to give your opponent a chance to pick it up. The other kind of card in the deck are ops cards, and there's 1s, 2s, and 3s. You could either activate any journal with a certain strategy rating, a 1, 2, or 3 for a 3 ops card. You could take 3 PC marker actions, which are a little different for each side, or you can bring reinforcements into the game. Let's talk about activating generals first. Let's pick a general here. Here's one. Hi, Lafayette. Lafayette has a strategy rating of 1, meaning that an ops value of 1, 2, or 3 can be used to move him. He has a battle rating of 2, which is the highest possible, what's the word I'm looking for? Modifier to your dice during a battle roll, and has an agility rating of 1. Agility is more important for Americans because it affects their abilities to retreat or intercept, but it's also important for the British because it can affect enemy losses during a battle. So by activating a general, you take that space in up to 5 CUs, up to 4 spaces, or if you're an American, 5 spaces, but only if you do not engage in battle during those 5 spaces. Which is a pretty important advantage for movement. There is also one very special card which allows you to move 6 spaces. But it's only for Americans, and I don't think we may or may not see it. Who knows? That's what activating a general does. You activate the general, you move him, and then you're done with your ops card. PC actions are a little bit different for either side. So let's talk about them here. I'm looking for PC actions. Here we go. Americans can place a PC marker anywhere on the board as long as there is no British unit. Or they can flip a marker if they have an American general or an American army. So you can only place an empty spot, but you can flip if you have your soldiers there. You can do that 3 times with a 3 ops card, twice with a 2 ops card, 1 time with a 1 ops card. The British can do these too, but it's a bit trickier for them because they must be adjacent to an existing marker or in a port. Also notice that the British can only place... you can also place under a British army, whether they're adjacent or not. But it must be an army. An army is defined as a general and a unit. A unit alone is not good enough. It must be both. Or they can flip a marker... I think at any time, actually. I think the British can actually always flip. They don't have to have American units there. Let me double check that from the rules, because that's a pretty important thing to consider here. So I want 10 point, or I want 6.3.2. No, I don't. You lied to me, Index. PC markers is 6.32. Oh, B. Nope, that's not it. Because it's in 10. Okay, yeah, they do need to have an army there to flip it. That's not clear from the player aid, but I wanted to double check on that. So the big advantage is the Americans can place them anywhere their heart desires, so long as there's no British units there or British PC there. The British have to go adjacent, and they can't daisy chain. So if the British have played this 3 ops card, they cannot play the 3 right off of each other. That's 3 new places, and that'll be clear as we actually play the game. So each side will play 7 cards over the course of their turn, and that ends the strategy phase. The strategy card phase is when you actually draw. The strategy phase is when you play. Winter attrition and a French naval phase, and the rest of this we'll talk about when they come up. I think it's time to go ahead and get started. So we begin... Oh, I didn't talk about reinforcements. That's something I did forget. The British can bring in reinforcements once per turn, using any ops card they desire. The Americans can play 2 ops cards, and they get that many troops. So if the Americans played a 3 ops card, they would get that many reinforcements. They get 3 of them. The British get a finite pool of resources, reinforcements, that change every turn. So for instance, our first turn here, I'm going to be placing 1, 2, and 3. The British get 3 armies to place anywhere they want. Oh, that's right, you actually put them in here. And they can also bring on 1 general, and they can go to any port that doesn't have an American PC, a CU, or the Continental Congress. The Americans can go to any space on the board, provided that there is no, I believe space has to be, I'm pretty sure it has to be American controlled. I don't think it can be uncontrolled. I think it has to be American controlled. Let me quickly check here. No, it doesn't list it here. And we do American reinforcements. There is, the manual is part of the game there. I just found it easier to just look it up here. Okay, it can actually be uncontrolled. That's awesome. So that's the third thing you can do with an ops card. That's it. We've already completed the reinforcement phase, which is literally just determining how many units the British get. And now we're going to do the strategy cards phase. The American player always gets their cards first. So they're going to draw 7 cards. I then switch to the Brits, and they draw 7 cards. Next, we determine who goes first. The British player, but the very first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at their hand. Oh, no. That's gross for the British. Oh, we'll talk about that later. But the British player to have a major or minor campaign, they can determine who goes first. Sorry, they go first with the British or with a major or minor campaign. If they do not have a major or minor campaign, or simply have one and choose not to use it, then the initiative passes back to the Americans, and then they determine who goes first. So let's talk about the different... Oh, there's one more step in the setup I forgot to do. Very important step that's very easy to forget about. At the end of the setup, we get some additional markers are placed on the board. I knew that had to happen. First, we have the committees of correspondence. The American player gets to put 1 PC in every colony, except Canada. 1 per colony. So we're going to start doing that right now. So, in New Hampshire, it doesn't really matter which one we pick. We'll take Norwich. This now means that potentially New Hampshire could be played if they like. But that's going to have to determine how things are from there. Next, I'm going to place one in Massachusetts, and I'm going to go ahead and take Springfield. Next, New York. I'm going to put it right in New York City. Pennsylvania, let's go ahead and put it in Bassetttown. New Jersey, let's go ahead and put it in New Brunswick. Delaware, then technically we get Rhode Island, because it's 1 per colony. Let's see, finish in New Jersey, we did Delaware. Next we do Maryland. I'm going to put that in Baltimore. Virginia. Let's go for Yorktown. North Carolina, we're going to put it in Camden at South Carolina. Just kidding. So then we're going to do Charlotte for North Carolina. I'm trying to do a sneaky thing from the beginning of the game. That's not a CU. That's a CU, not a PC. Don't cheat, Abby. And last, we put one in Georgia, and I'm going to put that one in Augusta. Now, the British get what's called the For the King markers. These can be placed anywhere they want to on the board, with the necessary restrictions that they must be adjacent to existing units and they cannot be daisy-chained. But they do get 3 of them. And I think where would the British like to place their markers? They definitely don't want to get isolated early on. So the Brits are going to go here. That's adjacent to those 2. And that kind of protects them a bit. Oh, Massachusetts only has 5 spaces, so they can definitely force the American player to react to them and get an early advantage by placing one here and one there. So now we're going to quickly check each colony and determine who controls it so that we can update this. So starting with New Hampshire, the Americans control 1 space, nobody else has any, they control New Hampshire. Massachusetts, the British actually controlled 3 spaces, the Americans only control 2, so Massachusetts opens the game as a British colony. Oh, I didn't put any markers in Connecticut as part of my committees of correspondence, so I get Connecticut. Sorry about that. New York, there is 1 American marker there, which is enough to ensure they maintain control of it, but it's not going to be that way for long. Somewhat confusing, but important to remember, is that Fort Detroit is part of Canada. It is not actually part of Michigan in this game. Because Michigan doesn't exist yet. In a state sense. Okay. Americans control New Jersey. Americans control Rhode Island. Americans control Delaware. Pennsylvania is American. Delaware is American. Maryland is American. Virginia is actually nobody. Nobody controls Virginia. So I'm just going to move this off as a reminder that nobody controls it. Because we each have 1 PC there. The British control North Korea. I am so sorry. North Carolina. Yikes. And nobody controls South Carolina. But the Americans do control Georgia. Okay. Now the Americans can look at their hand and they can decide, do we want to go first? So, let's talk strategy right now. At the beginning of the game, I've got good old George and a stack of 5 right next to Boston with a stack of 5. That is not an easily won battle. I'm just going to put that out there. That is not an easily won battle. And I'm facing Howe, who is one of the best generals that the British have. He's very difficult to move, but there's not... If we're going to try to take Massachusetts this turn, we're going to have to fight Howe. And we definitely want to fight. Because one thing that we want to do as the Americans is bring the French into the game. It's going to give us a bunch of more units and some other very powerful advantages that'll really start to tip the game in our favor. That's not going to be happening very soon, although sooner than we might expect because we don't know that the British have that one Benjamin Franklin goes to France card. So the real question is, okay, I've got 4 ops cards, 3 of them are 2s, and 1 of them is a 1. I have 1 American event, which lets me put a PC in any 3 spaces in the 13 colonies that don't contain any British playing piece. That's very powerful, but I don't need to play it now. And then I've got 2 events that actually help the British, which is kind of gross. I don't like these at all. So as the American player, I have the initiative. I can choose who goes first, and I'm actually going to say that the British can go first. Because by going last, I have 1 turn where the British can't do anything to get in my way, which is pretty great. So the British player says, okie dokie, and the game begins. Now, note the top of this card says must be played. I cannot avoid playing this card. I cannot avoid it. And knowing that I have this card is going to definitely affect some important things. But something even more important. I cannot move Howe with this existing cards. Howe has a strategy rating of 3, and I don't have a 3. Now I could, if I were so inclined, go ahead and build an operations queue. An operations queue, basically, I play cards and do a queue that will eventually let me activate him. I don't really want to waste 2 cards just moving 1 person, though. So, no matter what the American player thinks, Howe is staying put. I can't move him unless I get sneaky. What I could do instead, get in there, Lafayette, is I could play my reinforcements to begin the turn, and then I could bring in one of my additional generals. All of whom are 2s, and, well, sorry, 2 of them are 2s, and they're not terrible. That is one thing that I could do. Because Howe is a great general, but he's a great defensive general. And if we could make a move on Philadelphia, that would be pretty amazing. So let me think for a moment. What do I want to do as the British player? I'm also double checking to see if the Brits have to use a campaign. Nope, they don't. The Royal Navy is very dangerous. The Brits could land anywhere they want. And I can't really stop them. They could even land in Philadelphia. Which I'm pretty sure should have a CU on it. Let me make sure that's not accurate. Oh, but you know what? I don't think they can move to a space that contains an American CU, maybe? I'm trying to figure out why on earth. Yeah, okay, yeah. An American PC marker stops it. So that's good. Otherwise, they just go right there. And I'd be pretty upset about that. So. What do I want to do as the Brits? I remove an American PC marker from any 2 spaces that are within 2 spaces of a British general and does not contain an American unit. I could only use that for 1, unfortunately. I can only remove from Springfield. That's a good card, but just right now, I don't feel any particular desire to play it. As Team Britain, I can be reasonably certain that the Americans are not going to want to risk an attack on Boston right now. They could win. It would be tricky, but I don't really think it makes sense to, as this situation exists right now, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Now, if the Americans can take control of Massachusetts, that gives them a +1 to their die roll modifier. Here's the different things that affect die rolls for combat, so it's a good idea to talk about this now. This affects what you're expecting here. So in Boston, the Brits are going to get 5 for their CUs, the possibility of 5 for their general, 1 for British regulars, 1 for the Royal Navy, and 1 for a militia. That's a minimum of +13 to the die roll. The Americans would get 5 for their units, 5 for Washington, potential. There's some dice rolling that happens there. And then if it's the last card of the turn, and Washington does it, I get another +2. But as the American player, I don't think it makes sense for me to attack Boston. The question is, do the British want to get offensive with the force in Boston? I think the British are better suited to forcing the Americans to react to them. Which I think would mean landing forces in... which I think would mean getting reinforcements in Norfolk. That gives them an army they can actually move, although the Americans don't know that. And it lets them start to threaten Philadelphia. That is a threat that the Americans cannot ignore. And it also gets them along the way to taking control of Virginia. So I think that's exactly what the British player is going to do. So he's going to take a 1-ops card and place it in this box. The British can only use it once, and he's going to bring in Cornwallis and his 3 CUs into Norfolk. And that concludes the British turn. Over to the Americans. Now, I am very, very concerned about that. I'm extremely concerned about that. I definitely don't want the British to get Philly without a fight. So I'm going to play a 1-ops card, and this just gets discarded to activate Washington and his troops. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3... hang on a second. We were in Lexington Concord, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's close. I can get to Philadelphia. That's fine. Done. Unlike other war games, only the Americans can intercept or retreat before battle. The British can't do that at all. So, the American turn is now complete, and we return to the British turn. Now, the British have a golden opportunity to get an easy victory. At least they would if they could move Howe, which they can't. So the question for the Brits now is, what do they do with Cornwallis? They force Washington to respond. Great. Now what? The British could just start playing some events. Oh, dang. I didn't think of that. I should have had him move somewhere. I can have him move somewhere. What I could do is I could have him move to Alexandria. And that would let me kick the Americans out of both Baltimore and Yorktown. And Yorktown is huge because that gives me another port even farther up to bring in reinforcements on a later turn. So I think it's exactly what the Americans do, or the Brits are going to do. They're going to play a 2 ops card, activate good old Corny, and they're going to move up here to Alexandria. Back to the Americans. So as you can see, turns can actually go quite quickly. The Americans have maximum flexibility. The problem is there's not really an obvious place for them to go. Carleton has what, 2 dudes? Yeah. Carleton's even harder to move, though. Could bring on Arnold and, like, 2 guys. I just don't know where I'd do that. I could bring him in Baltimore. I don't know why I would, though. Because I don't think we'd do very well against Cornwallis. It would very much... I mean... Actually... Bringing in Arnold to face Cornwallis is not a terrible decision for 2 reasons. First of all, I would have the militia advantage there. And losing wouldn't hurt very much, but winning would be pretty massive. Is that the play I want to make? Is that the play I wish to make? I think it is the play I want to make. But I can even improve my odds by being deliberately sneaky. Which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to play my 2 ops card. That's going to get me 2 units. And a general of my choice. And I'm going to pick good old Benny Boy. Yes, he made some certain decisions in the game, in real life, but hopefully won't do that in the game. And we're going to put him here in Wilmington. Now, this is where we talk about interception. The Americans may intercept onto any space, provided it does not contain a British unit. It must be less than or equal to the Americans' agility rating. Arnold is a 2. And that's going to be basically a 1. That's going to be a 2. The question is, how are the Brits going to react to this? So basically, I'm trying to goad him into moving into Baltimore. But what I don't realize is that the British have a hole card. Namely, Lieutenant Colonel Simcoe's Queen's Rangers. I can remove 2 American PCs as long as they don't have units, as long as they're 2 say within a British general. A boom, a boom. I found the Americans, I'm like, well, that wasn't very nice of you. Or very nice of you, for that matter. And I have another consideration as well, which is that Washington is not in winter quarters. But I've got a plan with him. And that plan is to go for a battle if I can manage it. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and play an ops card. And we're going to place 2 PCs. 1, 2. The Americans retain control of Maryland, and all is well. Where's Maryland? There it is. Okay, back to the British. The British can only move Cornwallis one more time. Or they could start placing PCs to get control of Virginia. Like, this is classic bait right here. And while the British player is reasonably confident of being able to win, he's not super confident that it's going to happen. The bigger question is, if we don't attack with Cornwallis, is Washington going to go after Cornwallis? I think we're going to play it a bit conservative. Play it a bit conservative as the British. Front, I got 8 soldiers that are going to be coming in next turn. I can make a whole big-ass mess with that option. So I think we're going to go ahead and play a 2 ops card to go ahead and place 2 political control markers. It's got to be adjacent to an existing marker or on a space that the British are standing on. So I'm going to put 1 there and 1 there. Why there, you ask? Because this will actually give the British control of Virginia at the end of the turn. Which is pretty good. It's pretty good. Back to the Americans. Oh, that's brilliant. He can't play that card. Because the European War is not in effect. That doesn't happen until after the French get involved. So I am here for that. That means playing this card won't hurt me as the Americans, which is what I was very concerned about. I have an opportunity to actually cause a whole lot of havoc to the British. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and discard Admiral Ronnie captures St. Eustatius. Now, the British could discard an ops card to take it, but he can't be legally played because the European War hasn't happened. So they're just going to let that go. And I'm going to put a PC, because I can put it anywhere, right? Right there. These are going to be isolated at the end of the turn. Unless the Brits do something about that. So they're not happy about that. So what are the British going to do? They don't want to lose these 3. It would basically give the Americans 2 colonies in North Carolina and South Carolina. But the only way to stop that would be to send Cornwallis over there. And Cornwallis can't quite get there. And most importantly, I can't move Cornwallis. I may have been outflanked down there. Oh well. The Brits are saving this card for a battle because that just makes the most sense for them. He's going to go and get the Payne over with. He's going to play Benjamin Franklin, Ambassador, Minister to France, and that increases his track by 4. Yikes. When this hits 9, the French get involved in the war. So this is a bad card, but I can't hold it, and I remove it from the game. That's very yikes, but it's what had to happen. The Americans are now going to go ahead and play Thomas Payne, publishes pamphlets Common Sense in the American Crisis. And he gets 3 PCs anywhere in the 13 colonies as long as there's no British playing piece there. So he is going to go 1, 2. Can I isolate any more British markers? I don't think I can, because the rest of them are basically like on the ocean. Wait, do I already have control over New York? I sure don't. Yes, I do. But still, New York is a good state to have secured, and the British could always get squirrely and try to move out of Canada. So that's that, and that gets removed from the game as well. Back to the Brits, and they're going to go ahead and play a 1-ops card. That's going to automatically get placed no matter what, unless he gets defeated. So he's just going to go ahead and place a marker in... Is Fort Detroit isolated? No, because it can draw to the troops that are sitting on top of it. That makes sense. He's going to go ahead and place a marker in... Try to get a stranglehold in Virginia by placing it here at Lynch's Ferry. Back to the American turn. They're going to discard Lord George. Offers amnesty. The British player would love to grab this if they had an ops card, but they don't. The British player is going to be like, I choose not to play it. Yes. But that gives me 1 PC action. Or wait. No. Let me check the winter offensive rule. Because it's very important that I get this right. Maybe it's actually on the player aid. I need to start checking the player aid first. Not listed here. Here we go. Is initiated by last strategy card. That's 9.44. So I don't think if I spent a card in battle that it would count, but maybe it would. Let me see here. Last strategy card in the strategy card phase. I guess that would count. Because it's the last strategy card in the strategy card phase, right? Oh, no. That means the British... If the British play one, it wouldn't count. Yeah. So I'm going to do what I said initially. Sorry. I'm going to discard that card. I was going to use it as a battle modifier, but I think it's fine. And I'm going to place a marker anywhere I like. And I'm going to put that marker right here. So basically, I'm going to get South Carolina at the end of the turn. Although the British are going to have Virginia pretty tight. The American player, the British player now discards Light Horse Harry Lee. The Americans could pick it up, but there'd be no point because they can't use it. They just could discard it again. So they're going to let that go. And the Brits are going to 1 PC action. I think they're going to push into New Hampshire. Oh, that's why you have these markers here. I didn't realize that that's clever. It's a reminder that you're supposed to do 13 and 3. Oh well. Never put that together. And here the Americans do what the British thought was probably going to happen. They activate Washington, and we're going to get ourselves a good old-fashioned battle. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. So imagine a moment I'm actually moving this army into Alexandria, Virginia. But I'm not going to do it just because of the way the board snap works. I need to grab a thing really quickly here. I saw someone do this in another game, and it's really helpful. It's a way to track how someone has, what people have in terms of die modifiers. So, okay. So now we talk about the resolution of a combat. Do we have the combat phase thing? Well, let's reveal it here in the rulebook. Okay, so the first step is the attacker declares they want to play a card. The attacker has no card, so he can't play any. You can play any card for any strategy card for a +1, an event, sorry, or you can play a specialized event for a +2. The Americans have no cards. Done. Next, we do the British, and the British also have no cards. Step 1 is complete. Step 2, we're each going to roll to determine our battle rating. So, George Washington has a 5. We're looking for... oh, here we go. It's right over here. So Washington needs a 4 through 6 to get his full George Lee powers. Unlock the wooden dentures. He gets a 6. So that's going to be a +5 for the Americans. Ooh, and good old Corny here is cut down to 2. But the good news for him is he only had 3 units, so the best he could have done is a +3. So that's 5 for America and 2 for the Brits. So now I'm going to go and add up all the modifiers and make the roll for the American player. Because you actually roll that part first. Because you get to basically see... Okay. So next we're going to add up the... Actually, let me just make 2 of these dice, and then I can track it that way. Ah, I don't need that many. Thanks, though. So I'm going to put this over here by the Brits as a reminder. I'm going to put this over here by the Americans as a reminder. Where did you go? Extra chrome die? Did I delete you? That's unfortunate. Okay, so the Americans start with a +5 modifier. They did an intercept. This battle is taking place in Virginia, so they don't get the militia. I do get a +2 for having George Washington. And I get my number of units. So that's actually a total of a +12. 5 for Washington, 5 for the CEs, and 2 for the winter offensive. So I'm going to set this roll to 12. And this is a reminder that this is what my modifier is going to be when I actually roll. Next, we swing around over here and we check out the Brits. So Cornwallis got a 1 to 3, so he gets a 2 for that. He has 3 units for a 5. He does have British regulars, so that's a 6. It is taking place in a port, so he gets Royal Navy for 7, and he has militia, so he gets an 8. So this is certainly not a foregone conclusion one way or the other. Next we roll. And the Americans rolled a 1. That's not great. Come on, Brits, screw up the roll. Sorry, I'm an American. I don't want the Brits to win, but if they do, they do. Oh, no! Well, the Americans lose the battle to the British because of their superior regular army and the fact that it was on a port where the Royal Navy could help them out. Wait a minute. Let me make sure of something here really quickly, because it actually completely changes the battle. Because otherwise they'd be tied. For the port advantage, does it have to have a British PC on it? It might actually be on the card. If available, not available if it's in a blockaded zone, that's fine. That's not what I care about. Regardless of the PC status of the port. Okay, so there you go. If the Americans had rolled anything but a 1, or the Brits had rolled anything but a 6, I would have won as the Americans. But it happens. So now, the Americans have been defeated and they have to stay in Baltimore. They can't advance. Now we determine losses. So first we roll to determine the combat losses of the losing side. Here we go. So we now roll a 6-sided die, and we actually want to roll low now. But we don't. That's 3 dead Americans. Reducing this once proud stack to 2. Now the British have to roll to see if they lost anybody. And they might. So we're going to take a real quick look here. So, the losing general's agility rating. Washington, I believe, is it? Okay, he's a 2. So basically, there's a 50-50 shot that they're going to lose something too, if they roll a 1 to a 3. They lost a unit, so that could have been worse, but it also could have been better. And I don't think an American defeat reduces the track. It's only if Washington gets captured. Any general that's defeated because they can't retreat comes back in the game later on, except for Washington. Washington's the only general that's gone forever. So that's it. That didn't go as well as America might have hoped. But it could have gone a lot worse. Next we do winter attrition. And winter attrition is quite simple. And we're going to start with the Americans first, because the Americans are actually easier. Any space with more than 2 units loses half their strength, with one exception. If it is Washington's forces, and they're either south of the winter quarters line or in a winter quarters spot, like, for example, Baltimore, Maryland, they don't lose anything. Good old Arnold here has... what is he at? 1 unit? No, he has 2. So one of them dies. No die roll, just dead. Any other American spots with more than 2 units? That's got exactly 2 units. It is south of the winter attrition line, but Americans don't care about that. Americans just don't really care. Except for Washington. So they lose half their strength, so one of those is going to die. And then any single unit that doesn't have a general with it, oh, green. Green loses a unit. if you lock something, can you still flip it? No, you can't. That's fine. And there is no single American unit, so nobody just, like, fucks off. Because that's a possibility, too. The British, they lose attrition unless they're in winter quarters or south of the attrition line. But any single unit might desert. So we need to roll to see if this guy in Fort Detroit is going to run away and go home. Because everybody else for the British is safe. They're either in winter quarters or south of the line. Actually, they're all just in winter quarters. And winter quarters is any city or fort. But you have to roll. And I believe desertion is 1 to 3 desert, 4 to 6 stay. Yeah. Because he would be the only person that could potentially be lost. So if they go to 1 to a 3, the guy in Fort Detroit is disappearing. And he is. That's unfortunate for them. So winter attrition is now complete. Next, we check the French naval phase. The French Navy isn't even involved. We skip that. Next, we're going to do political control phase. So the first thing that happens is any unit underneath CUs or any PC underneath CUs immediately flips. Let me make sure that does not apply for generals, but I think it has to be either one of them. Containing your armies. So armies means general plus unit. Units alone don't flip anything. So, Washington has an army in Baltimore, but it's already his, so no worries there. Cornwallis has an empty space, but he gets to place his marker there because his army is there. Let's see here. Nothing changes here. These bases already had American units there. And that guy doesn't do anything, even if he could, because he is not an army. Political control, the first part is all done. Now we check isolation. And first we check the Americans. So remember, we can draw to an empty space, the Continental Congress, an American general, or an American army. This can draw to an empty space. This can draw to a unit. This can draw to an empty space, empty space or general, and empty space. So that means that the Americans lose no markers. Now the British can get isolated, and isolated they do indeed get. First of all, Fort Detroit is isolated. Because it is not a port, and there's no way to draw to an American thing, so that is gone. These three here are also removed because they cannot draw to any empty spaces or ports or British troops. So 1, 2, and 3. The last part of the political control phase is now that all of that has been determined, we're going to go ahead and check every colony one at a time and determine who actually owns it. You can do this at any time, technically. I just like doing it now because it's easier to remember. Okay, so Canada, still British. In order to have control of Canada, you must have both Quebec and Montreal. Fort Detroit technically doesn't actually matter, which is why the Brits aren't too sad that they lost it. New Hampshire is 1 British, 1 American, and that's it. New Hampshire is now a neutral colony. New York. The Americans have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So they're pretty happy about that. They keep New York. Massachusetts stays British. Connecticut is American. Rhode Island is American. Pennsylvania is American, just. New Jersey is American. Maryland is American. Delaware is American. Virginia is British. North Carolina is now neutral because there is one in Charlotte and then one in Wilmington, so that is basically a wash. The Americans do get South Carolina and retain Georgia. And there we go. Because of the initial teach, I'm going to go ahead and end this first episode here. I hope you guys are enjoying the series. Next time we're going to start off with 1776 and into 1777 and see what's going to happen next. I was really hoping for an American victory there, friends. I was really hoping we could win the Battle of Alexandria and potentially gain up to 3 more movements on the French alliance track. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, and we have a chance to get some stuff done next turn. Until then, though, this has been Avindian. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much to the amazing individual that actually created this mod. I don't normally do shoutouts during videos, but I'm just so unbelievably happy that this exists now, when it didn't before, that I want to see who I should be thanking for this on camera. Well, not on camera, but it is sbwilson. Mr. or Ms. Wilson, my proverbial hat is off to you. Thank you for this amazing mod. And thank you for watching, gentle viewers. Until next time, this has been Avindian. Thank you for watching, and I bid you good day.